A bus driver's act of discrimination sparks an unexpected turn of events that changes everything. What happens next will leave you speechless. The year is 1961, a time when strict segregation laws still ruled America's southern states. These laws separate black and white Americans in almost every part of daily life, including schools, restaurants, and even buses. A bright yellow bus stops on a busy city street to pick up passengers. There is a long line of people waiting, and everyone knows the rules. White passengers sit in the front of the bus, while black passengers are forced to sit in the back. A sign on the bus reads, "Seats reserved for whites only." The bus driver, a large man in his 50s with a tough, stern face, watches the passengers closely as they board. "Let's move it along, folks. Whites up front, coloreds to the back," he shouts, his tone commanding. Among the passengers is Sarah, a young black woman in her late 20s. She is dressed neatly but simply, carrying a small bag. Her face shows a mix of determination and quiet frustration as she steps onto the bus. "Good afternoon," she says in a calm voice. The driver doesn't even greet her back. Instead, he cuts her off sharply. "You know the drill." Back of the bus. Sarah hesitates for a moment, meeting the driver's eyes in a silent challenge. The other passengers watch nervously, unsure of what will happen. Finally, Sarah walks to the back of the bus, but the look on her face shows she is not defeated. Deep inside, she is resolved to take a stand, even if today isn't the day. The bus continues along its usual route, weaving through the busy streets. Sarah sits quietly in the back with the other black passengers, but her mind is racing. Up at the front, the atmosphere is completely different. White passengers are chatting, laughing, and enjoying their ride without a second thought. The divide is painfully clear, but Sarah knows she can't accept this injustice anymore. She adjusts her bag, takes a deep breath, and rises from her seat. The other passengers glance at her, puzzled by her sudden movement. Instead of heading for the exit, Sarah walks toward the middle of the bus. She spots an empty seat among the white passengers and sits down. The air grows heavy with tension. Whispers start almost immediately. "What does she think she's doing?" a woman murmurs. "Is she out of her mind?" says another. A man sitting nearby glares at her, but doesn't say anything. The driver, hearing the commotion, glances in the rearview mirror. His eyes narrow as he realizes what has happened. Slamming his foot on the brakes, he brings the bus to a sudden halt. Passengers lurch forward, some gasping in surprise. The driver stands up abruptly, his face red with anger. He stomps down the aisle, his heavy boots echoing in the silence. "What do you think you're doing, lady?" he growls, towering over Sarah. "Get back to where you belong." Sarah looks up at him, her expression calm but firm. "I'm sitting in an empty seat just like everyone else," she replies. Her voice is steady, but the challenge in her tone is unmistakable. The driver's jaw tightens. "Not on my bus, you're not," he snaps. "Now move, or I'll make you move." The other passengers sit frozen, their eyes darting between Sarah and the driver. Some look uncomfortable, while others seem eager to see how this confrontation will play out. Despite the driver's threat, Sarah doesn't move an inch. She sits tall, her hands resting on her bag, and meets his furious glare with unwavering determination. As the driver leans forward to grab Sarah's arm, the bus door suddenly swings open. Everyone's attention shifts to the two figures stepping aboard: a police officer in a crisp uniform and a city official holding a clipboard. The officer's expression is serious, and the entire bus falls silent. The driver, startled by the interruption, straightens up and glares at the newcomers. "What's going on here?" he demands. The officer ignores his question and addresses the driver directly. "Are you the operator of this bus?" he asks in a firm tone. The driver hesitates, his face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Yeah, that's me." "Why?" he replies. The city official steps forward and speaks clearly, ensuring everyone on the bus can hear. "We've received several complaints about your discriminatory behavior," he announces. "Effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties." The driver's face turns bright red as a wave of shock spreads through the bus. "What? You can't do this. I've been driving this route for years," what he protests, his voice rising in anger. The officer remains calm but unwavering. "We can and we are. Your actions violate newly established anti-segregation laws. Please step off the bus now." The passengers exchange stunned glances. some whispering in disbelief. The driver, now fuming, looks around for support but finds none. Reluctantly, he grabs his hat and storms off the bus, muttering under his breath. The city official watches him go before turning back to address the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, "segregation on public buses is no longer allowed. From this moment forward, everyone is free to sit wherever they choose." A wave of applause erupts from the passengers, breaking the heavy tension. Sarah's expression softens as she takes in the scene. Justice has finally arrived. The officer nods respectfully at Sarah before stepping off the bus with the city official. The new driver, a younger man with a friendly demeanor, climbs aboard and takes his place at the wheel. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's continue our journey," he says with a warm smile. The bus starts moving again, and for the first time there is a sense of unity among the passengers. Sarah sits confidently in her seat, knowing that her quiet act of defiance has made a difference. As the bus rolls through the city streets with its new driver, a quiet sense of change fills the air. Sarah remains seated at the front, her posture upright and her face glowing with quiet triumph. The other passengers steal glances at her, some with admiration and others with introspection. The moment feels bigger than the bus itself, a crack in the wall of injustice that has stood for far too long. Word of the incident spreads quickly. By the time Sarah steps off the bus at her stop, a small crowd has gathered, eager to hear what happened. Sarah, ever humble, simply smiles and says, "Sometimes standing up starts with sitting down." Her words resonate deeply, and those around her nod in agreement. One woman in the crowd, an older lady who has lived through years of segregation, takes Sarah's hands and whispers, "Thank you for your courage." Later that day, Sarah attends a local meeting of civil rights activists. She recounts the events on the bus, not as a story of personal defiance, but as an example of collective progress. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she tells the group, "but every small action brings us closer to the world we deserve." The room erupts in applause, her words igniting a renewed sense of purpose among those present. In the weeks that follow, Sarah's quiet act of bravery inspires others to challenge injustice in their own lives. Local newspapers pick up the story, framing it as a turning point in the fight for equality. Activists use the incident to rally support for broader efforts, organizing protests and advocating for legislation to end segregation once and for all. Back on the bus route, things are different now. The new driver greets all passengers warmly, and the atmosphere is more inclusive. People sit where they choose, and while tensions occasionally linger, the shift toward equality is undeniable. Sarah often rides the same bus, her presence a reminder of the power of one person's stand. "This is how progress begins," the narrator concludes. "One act of courage, one moment of resistance, and one ripple that grows into a wave." Sarah's story reminds us all that change is possible when we refuse to accept injustice. The screen fades to black with the words, "Inspired by true events." This story was inspired by the countless brave individuals who stood against injustice during the civil rights movement. Their courage paved the way for a more equal society. Let Sarah's story inspire us to continue that fight wherever inequality exists. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage and justice.